Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my April wrap-up. Alright guys, April was a really good reading month for me. I mostly read fantasy romance. I also reread one of my favorite romance series, and then I read a few age gap romances. But overall, all of the books I read, I think were either 3.5 stars or above, which is awesome! I love when that happens, so hopefully that trend continues throughout the year. And yeah, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all the books I read in April. Alright guys, so starting off with fantasy romance, I feel like we have to talk about Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. So this story, if you're unfamiliar, is following Aurea, and she is a human girl that is being raised in a vampiric kingdom, and she's actually being raised by the king of the vampires. He ended up finding her when she was a very young girl and raising her as his daughter. So Aurea, when she comes of age, decides that she is going to compete in these vampiric trials, and if she survives and becomes the victor, she'll be granted a wish from the goddess Nyaxia. Now, everyone else competing in these trials are other vampires, and like I said, she is human, so this is going to be unbelievably dangerous for Aurea. However, she does it anyway. So the majority of this book is us following her through these trials. She does end up aligning herself with vampires from another kingdom, and the story really goes from there. So I did enjoy this. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. However, I will say this was not at all what I was expecting, because people kept comparing this to From Blood and Ash and A Court of Thorns and Roses. I was expecting the romance to be very much at the forefront of this story, and that was not the case. This felt very much like the Hunger Games. There are so many trials, the action never really stops, but there was a romance, and I did very much enjoy the romance. It just wasn't as romance heavy as I was expecting, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I just went in with different expectations. So know that going in. There is a romance, but it is not the main bulk of this book. A lot of this is just following Aurea as she has to try to defend herself in these very, very dangerous trials. But anyway, I cannot wait to read the sequel. Unfortunately, the audio for the sequel I don't think is coming out until August, so I have a while to wait. But anyway, if you're thinking about picking this up and you haven't yet, definitely do so. 5-star read. And the next fantasy romance is another very popular series, and that is A Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Renee. So if you follow me on Instagram, you know I had a very difficult time explaining my thoughts on this book. So this is following Adara, and Adara is the human star-blessed, and what this means is she was born with almost like a star birthmark, and she is to be given over to the Fae when she comes of age. So the Fae actually drink the blood of the star-blessed in order to get like a power-up. So when she was born, her mother promised that she would marry the Fae prince when she came of age. So obviously Adara is very resentful about this. She did not choose this life, but anyway, when she comes of age, she ends up going to the Fae realms where she meets her fiancé. And once again, she's very unhappy about all of this, does not want to give her blood to this random stranger, and is just kind of upset about this entire situation. So then she meets the general of the armies of the Fae, and they kind of have a little bit of an intimate connection, and it's kind of a love triangle, but also kind of not. So, here's my thoughts on this book. It had potential. I love this story. I love the whole entire idea of this book. I honestly was really enjoying this book until about 2/3 of the way in. So the entire last third of this book kind of just becomes smut, and not smut in a way that actually enhances the plot, because I love smut. I'm all about it. However, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and there was a lot of it, and it wasn't really helping the story. It wasn't propelling the story forward in any way. And like, I wanted more of a fleshed out romance between Adara and the person that she is having the fun time with. So overall, it just felt a little surface level. I wanted more going on in the plot. I feel like this book definitely could have been longer and just developed the world a little bit more. But I do want to read the sequel because I want to know what happens. So I don't want to say it's not good, because I definitely want to read the next book. However, I had a lot of issues. So go into this at your own risk. I still don't know how I feel about it. It was fun. I wanted a little bit more out of it. And next up we have a Why Choose Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it is Bonded by Thorns, and this is by Elizabeth Helen. So this is following Rosalina, And at the start of the book, she is living in this small town where the entire community thinks her father is crazy because her father believes in the Fae. So Rosalina, one day when she actually gets proposed to by our Gaston character, hears that her father has gone missing. So while she's looking for him, she ends up falling into the Fae world. And there she finds her father, who's being held captive by these 4 different Fae. And these Fae all turn into beasts at night. They represent the different seasons. So we have a summer Fae, winter Fae, spring Fae, autumn Fae. And they make a bargain with her that they'll let her father go, but she has to stay with them and help them find their mates to break a curse that they are under. So I enjoyed a lot of parts of this book. I will say there are a lot of little Easter eggs that have to do with the Beauty and the Beast movie that I really enjoyed. It was a very fun story. The romance, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. So this is supposed to be Wide Shoes, and they're definitely setting it up for the next book for it to be Wide Shoes. This book is definitely more MM. Our main character really isn't involved in any of the steamy scenes in this first book, so just know that going in. But I am interested to see how this series progresses. I feel like this book was setting a lot of things up for what's going to come next. So I can't wait to continue with this series, and it was definitely a fun time. All right, so this next book is one of my favorite reads so far this year, and I don't know if I'm going to be the only one that feels that way. So I don't know if this book just has all of the tropes I like, and I read it at the right time, or if it's actually as good as I feel like it is, but that is The Coven, and this is by Harper L. Woods. This is the same author that wrote What Lies Beyond the Veil, which is another book that I absolutely loved, but most of my friends kind of hated. So The Coven is it's like a witchy, dark academia fantasy romance. We are following Willow, and Willow has pretty much been raised in secret by her mother. Her mother was a very powerful witch and ended up running away from the Coven, which is like a group of powerful witches that run this university. So her mother actually faked her own death and had Willow in secret. And that is because male witches in this world, if they want to have a family, they have to give up their powers. So Willow's mother ends up having a son, and Willow and her little brother, they're practicing magic, or Willow's practicing magic, but they aren't really part of the witch world. Well, then Willow's mother ends up dying, and the Coven realizes that Willow exists. So they send a vessel, and a vessel is essentially a vampire, but it is this being that is created, I think, by demons, and they drink witch blood in order to power themselves. So anyway, the Coven ends up sending the vessel that is known as Gray, and he's the headmaster of the university, and he tells Willow, hey, I won't tell the Coven about your little brother, but you gotta come with me without giving me any problems, essentially. She does give him problems, but eventually he is kind of able to overpower her, and he takes her to the university, and it is their story, and it is phenomenal. I love it so much. So we have age gap, we have forbidden romance, student teacher, we have elemental magic, because all of the different witches can harness the elements, and there's the law of equivalent exchange, which I love, gives me full Metal Alchemist vibes. I loved everything about this. So much. So check trigger warnings. It is pretty dark. Some of the scenes are a little bit, they're dark, so just check the trigger warnings. But overall, I loved this book so much, and I just cannot wait to read the sequel. And real quick, I just finished filming the clip you just watched, and I don't want to redo it, but I forgot to mention that Gray calls Willow Witchling throughout most of this book. And if you have read Throne of Glass, I loved it. I loved it so much. I am feral for that term. It is my new favorite pet name. Anytime he said Witchling, I was obsessed. And next up are 2 pirate romances that I actually read for a vlog that I collabed with Bex from Bex Reads. And first up we have On These Black Sands. And this is by Vanessa. This is the first book in a series, and this is following Aoife and Declan. So Aoife is this girl that is being raised to become one of the new heads of the Pirate Council. So the Pirate Council are comprised of different women that marry pirate lords, and she's been raised kind of in isolation. She's very naive, and she's been raised with 2 sisters that will also eventually become heads and part of this council. So anyway, in the very beginning of the story, Aoife is talking to her sister, who says that she is going to run away and go live with this pirate. She doesn't want to be part of this community anymore. She thinks something else is going on. And Aoife is very upset about this and accidentally spills the beans to her mother figure, and then her sister disappears. So this leads Aoife to believe that there might be something else going on with this pirate council, and she needs to get out of there ASAP. So she stows on board a ship, and the ship she stows on is Declan's ship. So Declan is a pirate, and he is trying to bring down the pirate council. We're not exactly sure why. And he ends up finding Aoife, and it's their story. I enjoyed this so much more than I was expecting. I will say there was some writing issues. I talk about it in the vlog if you want to go watch that. I can't really say it because it's a spoiler. But there were some things that I thought they had already kind of dealt with in the beginning of this book that is then used as a big reveal at the end of the book, which I found kind of confusing. But I loved Aoife and Declan. And next up I read From Tormented Tides. So this is more of an urban fantasy. We are following this girl that ends up moving to Florida to go to college, which is kind of unfortunate because she's terrified of water. And she has dreams about drowning. But anyway, her roommate convinces her to go out on this boat. And the boat ends up getting stuck on an island. So while she's on the island, she starts talking to this very attractive guy who's dressed as a pirate. Mind you, this is Halloween, so everyone's dressed up. And they just have this beautiful conversation and connection. And then she leaves and can't find him the next day, and no one knows who he is. And we eventually learn he is the ghost of a pirate, and he is stuck kind of like on a loop where every night he is able to walk around as a ghost and then he dies. So she decides that she is going to try to help him break the curse, and the story goes from there. So I did enjoy this. I am not the biggest fan of urban fantasy. It is just not really my thing. I like more like fantastical world and high fantasy. So I didn't love that part, but the story was engaging and entertaining, and I read the entire thing. So overall, I won't be continuing with this series, but I think this was very fun. And if you like pirate romances, very similar to like Pirates of the Caribbean, I think you will love From Tormented Tides. And last up for fantasy romance, I reread What Lies Beyond the Veil, so I could read What Hunts Inside the Shadows, and currently when I am filming this, I am halfway done the third book in this series. So if you have not read What Lies Beyond the Veil, it is one of my favorite fantasy romances. I have a full spoiler-free book review on this book I will leave in the cards and in the description, but the story is following Estella, and she is a human living in this very patriarchal community, and in this community there is a veil that separates the humans from the Fae. Now the Fae are described as being very dangerous, and in order to keep this wall or this veil going, they actually sacrifice a human every few years or so. So Estella ends up being the person that is chosen to be sacrificed, but right before they are about to slit her throat, they end up having the veil rupture and all of the Fae come spilling out, and they start marking humans with a Fae mark. So we learn that the humans that are Fae marked are actually people that are mated to the Fae or fated mates to the Fae, and all of the humans start killing the people they see with the Fae mark because they don't want the Fae to find their mates. So Estella has this Fae mark, so she's on the run. She ends up finding another guy that has a Fae mark named Callum. They decide that they are going to run away together, and it is their story, and I'm loving this series so much. Is it the best fantasy romance I've ever read? Definitely not. I think the writing leaves a lot to be desired. Pacing, it's very fast paced. Some things could be more fleshed out. And our main character is annoyingly predictable. However, it is every trope that I love. We have one bed, we have one horse, we have enemies to lovers, we have fated mates, we have awesome smut, great smut. This author, very good at writing spicy time. So overall, I'm loving this series and I highly recommend. Moving into romance, first up I read Highest Bidder, and this is by Cate. This is the 4th or 5th book in the Salacious Players Club. So if you're unfamiliar with the Salacious Players Club, it is a series that is following the founders of this club that people go to if they have certain kinks, and they go there so they're not judged. So every story is following a different founder. This is following Ronan, and I believe he was an investor in the club. He's a bit older. I forget his exact age, but I think he's like 20 years plus of the main character. But our main character is Daisy. Now, Daisy is a little down on her luck. She's living in the back of a van, and she is a waitress at Salacious. But one day she ends up being auctioned because Salacious has like these different auction nights where people will auction to like win a date with one of the people that are being auctioned. I hope that made sense. Anyway, Daisy ends up being auctioned and Ronan ends up winning a date from her, and it is their story. I loved this so much. I feel like Cate does such a good job of having these really emotional and like well-developed to a point stories. I will say this one, I feel like it was a little insta-love, which a lot of the other books aren't. But overall, I just loved the story, and the smut was very good. So we are following Ronan, and he is a pleasure dom. So he really just wants to take care of Daisy and help her heal. He gets frustrated with her because Daisy sometimes just like forgets to eat and doesn't take care of herself. And it's their relationship. At one point he ends up taking her to France, and it's just so good. It's so good. Ronan, I think, is actually better than Emerson. I never thought I would see the day when someone beat Emerson, but I loved him and I loved their relationship. So if you are reading the Salacious Players Club, I highly recommend. This is my new favorite. And next up, I read The Kingmaker Duet by Kennedy Ryan, and I actually read this as part of a vlog I did with Crystal's Bookish Life, so I will leave that vlog linked down in the description below. But I absolutely adored this duet. We are following Lennox and Maxim. So Lennox is Indigenous and she is Native American, and she's very proud of her heritage, and she's almost a social justice warrior. She really wants to stand up for her people and also people that are marginalized. Her mother ended up going missing when she was rather young, and the police didn't do anything about it. So when she is, I believe, 16 or 17 at the start of this book, she is protesting against an oil company that is trying to build on sacred land. So Maxim ends up being the son of the head of this oil company, and he sees Lennox protesting, and he is just blown away by her drive. So they end up being arrested together. Now, Lennox doesn't realize who Maxim is, and he doesn't really tell her. Now, there is a significant age difference between them, so nothing happens that night. But then 14 years go by, or maybe a little bit less than that. Time goes by, maybe 10 years, and they end up seeing each other again in Amsterdam, and a relationship soon blossoms. And it is their story, and it is so good. Somehow this had a very like fantasy romance, fated mates feel without actually being fated mates, and I just love that. This duet is spanning so many years. I think it's almost 20 years, but I wanted this couple to have an HEA so badly. So I highly recommend picking this duet up. I'm so upset that I waited so long, but I'm happy I finally read it. So thank you so much, Crystal. And last up, I reread the entire Stay With Me series by Nicole Fiorina as part of a read-along I did with Tori from Novel Life. So I love this series. I loved it even more my second time around, except for the third book. I didn't love the third book as much. But if you haven't read the Stay With Me series, we are following Mia and Ollie. Mia is described in the beginning of this book as being a sociopath. She lacks empathy, and she has turned off her feelings. So her family is kind of sick of her at this point, and they send her to a reformatory college in the UK, and when she gets there, she meets Ollie Masters. Cue angel singing. I love Ollie Masters. He is the perfect cinnamon roll soft boy, and I'm obsessed. He needs to be protected at all costs. But anyway, they end up having a relationship. Now, Ollie is the opposite of Mia, where he feels emotions way too deeply, and it's their romance. So the first one is following Mia, and they're all following Mia and Ollie. But I feel like this first book is really Ollie trying to heal Mia. The second book is Mia trying to heal Ollie, and the third book is their journey together and their romance when they're finally able to be together. Now, the third book, on my reread, I realized it's a little out there. There is a lot going on. We introduce gangs in the third book. It is a time. So all the books I rated 5 stars, except for the third book. I actually brought it down. I think I rated it 3.5. There was a lot happening in that last one. But overall, this is still one of my absolute favorite romance series, and I highly, highly recommend you pick it up. All right, guys, those are all the books I read in April, so thank you so much for watching. And if you've read any of the books I mentioned, please let me know down in the comments below. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!